And then the way that I want to structure this, obviously it's a really complex topic, right? And we're going to talk again about build to rent from both the conversion standpoint, and then also using it as an acquisition strategy. So I'm going to go through a number of different slides. I'm going to try to hit all of the key topics. And then at the end, I'm going to try to leave as much time as possible for just Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, I mean, I would say anything is on the table. If you guys have questions about the structure, the due diligence, financing stack, of course, I'm going to cover that in some slides. Really anything and everything related to build to rent, I am happy to answer any questions. I want to make sure that you guys walk away feeling like, one, this is a doable strategy for you, and then two, make sure that your questions are answered. So if that all sounds good, I would love to know though in the chat, is anybody currently building or have you built in the past? Be really great to kind of gauge, who's on today, experience level. And by the way, I've worked with investors on all spectrums, even brand new investors. We've helped get into a build to sell strategy or a build to rent. So really it can work for any investor. But I don't want to downplay it's a lot of work, right? Anything these days related to real estate is a lot of work. But again, I want to give you, maybe the sort of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 17 years related to building. So cool. So Ryan's finished geotech, diving into design. Awesome. Cool. And Ashley has built before. Awesome. Great. And so I'm assuming everybody else is maybe something that you're considering or just getting into. Tyler says, purchase one newly constructed turnkey home. Awesome. Expecting to receive a CO on 2 Cape Coral builds in the next 2 weeks. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so we do have some experience on the call. Amazing. All right, so again, there's a lot of different I think angles that we can come at from this. So I'm going to try to touch as many that I feel like are relevant. And then please go ahead and ask questions in the chat. I'm going to save questions till the end though, because maybe a question that you have is going to be answered on the next slide. So go ahead and ask all the questions in the chat. I promise I will get to every single question before we end. So anyways, if you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and dive in. Let me go ahead and share screen. Okay, and then I gotta do slideshow. All right. Okay, so again, this call is our build to rent deep dive. And the way that I'm using this strategy currently is actually creating deals instead of competing for them. Really surprisingly, I'm sure everyone is experiencing something similar. It's like the real estate market's kind of bipolar. Some markets are really, really moving fast. Other markets are really moving slow. So we are definitely taking advantage of that on our end, meaning that we are in some areas selling where the markets are moving really quick and then buying where it's a little bit of a slowdown. So for example, we actually just listed one of our apartment complexes in Michigan on Friday. I priced it a little bit higher than what the comp supported. And we got a full price offer, waived contingencies about 4 hours later. So anyway, so again, really, really interesting market right now, but where we're doing a lot of buys for the build to rent and build to sell, and we're coming in like we just secured a deal yesterday where we were like $30,000 under price. So again, really kind of unique and interesting with what's happening right now. All right, so here's what I want everyone to walk away with today. So we're going to talk about your blueprint for unlocking hidden value, both in your existing portfolio and then also of what's on the market right now. So I want to share this sort of hidden density strategy, which is what we're using again to find really pretty good deals. So I'm going to share with you guys kind of what to look for on how to legally add units without doing a short plat. So if anyone has ever done a short plat, you know that it takes so much time. I mean, gosh, the ones that we've done in the past, 18 months, 15 if you're really lucky, that's to just create the lots. Well, now everything has changed. There's a lot of municipalities, there's a lot of states even that are going and changing all of the zoning rules, basically eliminating the residential zoning where you can only have one house and allowing multifamily, allowing multiple lots, and also allowing the opportunity to create lots through condo. which is really, really incredible. And I mean, that's changed everything for us. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Again, a lot of these things, I want to give you an overview because I don't want to give you too specifics because it's going to be very area specific. It actually even changes based on municipality. So I don't want to go too much in the weeds on that, but of course, if you guys have questions at the end, I'm happy to answer that. But again, I want to give you the sort of overview of what to look for. Number two, I want to give you the real world math. I would say the $1,000,000 question that I get asked all the time when we're talking about building is, so what are the build costs? What is the price per foot? What does it cost for this? What does it cost for that? It's really dependent, right? So I'll kind of show you some different examples of some projects that we're working on currently so you can get an idea of how the pricing works, at least in the areas that we're in. I'm going to talk about realistic rents, ROI estimates for ADUs and conversions. You're always going to make more money doing conversions and ADUs on properties that you currently own. So for those of you that are maybe on this call that are like, I don't know if build to rent is for me. But if you have something in your portfolio that could support this, that is 1,000% going to be the easiest way to execute on this strategy. It's something that you already own where, it's already in your portfolio and you're just optimizing it, right? So that is always going to be my advice for any investor that's doing this for the first time. Number three is I want to share with you guys a little bit of sort of the areas and the municipalities where the best zoning tailwinds are right now, where this makes the most sense. So for the most part, we are doing a lot of these builds in Washington State. We're focusing on our existing portfolio and then some more acquisitions since we're going to be building anyway. But for those of you that are outside of Washington State, I don't want you to think that this isn't relevant for you. So I'm going to show you guys on the map, at least based on my research, where this can make sense in different markets. All right. So first, let's talk about defining the strategy, at least from the standpoint that I want to focus this call on, which is mostly infill. And we're going to focus mostly on ADUs, DADUs, and mostly residential properties. It's a whole nother ballgame when we're talking about apartment complexes. So we're not going to cover that in this call. So just to clarify that, we're going to start a little bit smaller. And that's what we're going to cover here. So, all right. So number one is the ground up construction. So obviously these are going to be new structures, higher cost, but higher potential. So what we're seeing is really common in a lot of areas where there's higher density is going to be these DADUs. So they're kind of also in some areas called backyard cottages. So again, they're brand new structures. Obviously, they have a little bit of higher cost for looking at like a price per foot, but also higher potential. It's a little bit easier to condo these, sell them off individually, or maybe say sell off a single family home and then keep a duplex in the back. There's a lot of flexibility with this. You also get the benefit of designing of what is maybe missing from the market. So that was my world before we started buying apartment complexes and doing things like that. We had multiple projects going every single year. And essentially what I would do is kind of twofold. I would look at what are the ARVs for maybe similar properties that are selling? What would it be worth at the end of the day? And then what would that rent for? So, sometimes, many, many years ago, we were trying to cram like as many bedrooms into these units as possible. We were doing like 4 2.5s, and I had a plan that we built over and over and over again. It was about 1,200 square feet. Looked actually pretty similar to this. These are actually detached units here. But we built that over and over and over again, and it rented really well. Obviously, we're getting a lot of families and things like that, but it was just really like small, efficient, inexpensive. Again, we were doing the same color scheme over and over and over again, and it just worked flawlessly. Number two, though, is I would say I'm calling this a low-hanging fruit. And this is the opportunity to do some conversions where you're repurposing existing space. It's going to be at a lower cost, and it's going to be a faster, quicker ROI. So as example, some images here. This could look like a garage conversion, or maybe even a potential structure conversion, sheds, basements, shops, lots of opportunity there, right? So repurposing existing space, lower cost, faster ROI. Now, I will say there are some challenges with this. We actually have one of these going on right now. And with the initial meeting that we had with the city, they were all for it. Like, yeah, that's great, green light. And then, when we submitted plans, they came back and said, oh, by the way, we forgot to mention you have to bring everything up to the energy code. which meant that we actually had to fur up the floor and essentially build a floor on top of the concrete slab because it did not meet the energy code, right? So that was an added cost, maybe to the tune of like $7,000. So sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. There's a lot more questions that you'll have to ask when you're doing a conversion project, depending on, of course, what you're converting. We were really lucky. The shop conversion that we're doing was actually not permitted to begin with. They didn't hit us up for that. They didn't say that that was going to be an issue. They just wanted everything to be brought up to code. So again, a little bit more expensive on that end, but overall really pretty quick to get into. That project should be done hopefully in like the next 30 days. And we started it in mid-October with a couple of vacations in the meantime. So again, a lot faster to move through a conversion project. So, all right. So again, I just want to give some more examples. I think anytime we're talking about construction and building, visual examples are really helpful. But yeah, I think we're all very familiar with the fact that we have a big housing gap, especially when we're talking about affordable housing, right? So when we're looking at different markets of where this could work for, again, we're looking for a housing gap, meaning lack of available housing, and then also potentially constraints as far as where you can build. So, of course, in my world, Seattle area actually works really, really well for that because we are constrained with Canada, mountains, and water, right? And so there's really only so much buildable land, which means that we have to go infill as opposed to the opportunity to go out. I happen to live in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and we have vast sprawl, right? It's the fifth largest city in the United States. However, there's really not that density that we're seeing other than, maybe some of the old town areas, right? So this strategy doesn't work so well in really vast areas where you've got a lot of room to expand. So again, I'll kind of show you this on the map a little bit more, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, what's really common now is, a single family home like this with maybe an existing detached garage that you can do a conversion to, rent that out separately, or do a condo and sell them off. So very similar to that. All right, so again, here's a couple of different diagrams. Again, my goal here is just to activate your reticular activator system in your brain as you're starting to go through listings and potential properties of like, okay, so what am I looking for? So this is every single morning, I go through all of the new listings and all of the price reductions. And the very first thing that I do is I actually go to the overview map and I look at the lot. So ideally, we are looking for something, in category number 1, where you've got a single family house that's maybe tucked, ideally as close to the front wide array as possible, with maybe a probably like at least 10 feet that goes beside the house, maybe in one area, and it has a nice big backyard. Right. So this is something that's great. I tend to look for 6,000 square feet. Some of you that are in higher density areas might say, well, my threshold is 4,500 or 4,000. So whatever that is for your area. But yeah, house forward, open lot in the back for driveway, and a future dadu or 2 in the back. Right. So this is really, really common. This is what we're looking for very often. Number 2 is if you have alley access, this is even better. Right? So again, you're looking for something where it's a single family or maybe even a multifamily towards the front. And then you've got a decent backyard with alley access. So setbacks, again, is going to depend on the municipality. The areas that we're building actually have no setbacks to the alley. So essentially we can tuck up a duplex or fourplex quad, dadu or 2 right up to the alley and essentially have that house access the back. We're going to fence off the yard so that this house has a nice little yard. These guys have a nice little yard, condo them. You can sell off the house, keep the back, or sell it. The other option is going to be like a multifamily with a rear build. By the way, I have examples of these, so I'll show you kind of what this looks like conceptually on the next slides here. But yeah, this is another one. So again, if you're looking at a multifamily, you've got a really big backyard, and you've either got alley access or you have room to punch in a driveway on the side, that's going to be a winner, right? So obviously, it's really great if you're doing acquisitions, if you can spot these. Or again, if you have these in your portfolio, I want you to be thinking, oh, okay, I do have a multifamily property with a huge backyard. Can I squeeze in either a driveway, or can I support parking up front with a walk back? That's another option. We have one of those going on right now where we've got it's a 4-foot walkway, and the tenants that are going to be living in this multifamily in the back are going to walk back, and then they'll be able to park in front. The other option, which I would say is probably more common when you're thinking about ADUs, right, is going to be like a single family with a basement conversion. So again, you can convert an existing single family home, convert a basement into a separate living unit. So sometimes this can be a little bit tricky. Again, you've got to factor in for, you probably would want a separate power meter. If you're getting into basements, you've got to have the egress windows. So for example, we have another apartment complex that has a really nice basement area with the ceiling height, that we need. It's like over 7 foot. But we don't have the egress, right? So we'd have to, basically dig into the foundation, create the egress windows and do it that way. So again, it gets pretty expensive when you're doing something like this, but if you already have an existing space that can support it, I would absolutely say go ahead and, go through the motions of like what that would look like. All right, so just to show you in real life what this looks like using our property. So this one this is actually the one that's going to be ready hopefully in the next 30 days. This one, it was making about $500 a month as storage. The yard's like all grown up. We had a tenant, gosh, he was there for I think 6 years, paying us $500 a month. And then we went and utilizing the new DADU rules, which actually is in the entire state of Washington. They removed all the residential zoning and said you can add 2 detached accessory dwelling units for every single family, as long as you can meet the setbacks, the parking requirements, and essentially all of the code. So since we already had this shop, we went in and said, great, we want to do a conversion. This is the one where they said, great, but you don't meet the energy code. So we had to get a structural engineer to essentially get it to meet current standards. So the total cost to convert this one, it's about $130,000. Now we're converting this into a themed Airbnb. It's actually going to be really pretty cool. If anyone's interested in some designs, I can show you at the end. So we're putting like a barrel sauna here, like fire pit. The projected revenue on this is going to be somewhere in like the $40,000 to $60,000 range. There's nothing else quite like this. We're about 3-minute drive to water, but it's in just a quiet residential neighborhood. But yeah, it's going to be a really cool property when it's done. But here's the thing, for the value when it's done, we're actually going to get a 4x multiple on this. So if we were to do the condo, which we're not doing right now, we'll do it right before if we decide to exit, so we can capture the value there. It'll be worth about $525. That's in, December 2025 value, right? So the equity created here is about $395,000. And then we're going to pull in conservatively about $42,000 in annual rent. Again, that's on a short-term rental. 32% ROI unlevered. So again, when I say that the low-hanging fruit is doing any kind of conversions or build on your own portfolio, this is an example of that, right? I did flag some challenges though. Permitting actually took us 12 months on this. We lost 5 months to a structural engineer. Nobody wanted to take this on. So literally we were calling and everyone's like, yeah, we'll help you if you want to build, but no, we're not going to do existing structure. So that was a really, really big delay there. And then we had so many red lines with the structural engineer that we chose. So I think I have a slide that's like what not to do at the end. But I do want to just flag this since we're on the topic, is your structural engineer is really, really important. If you hire the wrong one, they're going to over-engineer and it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you hire one that's maybe not as familiar and or takes a long time, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you hire someone that's not good, you're going to have red lines back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And anyways, good structural engineer is really, really important. The other thing too, it would really benefit you to either have somebody on your team or you get really familiar with like energy code. Again, this is more so Washington State, might not be so much in other areas. So I'm getting a little bit nuanced related to Washington State. But as an overview, I think it might apply to a lot of different markets as well. Structural engineer is a really, really big deal. So, all right, so that's an example there. This is another one. So these are kind of another interesting tip. We are calling this a stacked ADU, which is actually we're just building a duplex. But if we call it an ADU, we actually get credit on, we don't have to pay sewer capacity fees or water capacity fees. And we actually get credit. We get like a 50% on the traffic fees and I think on the park fees as well, to the tune of about $40,000. So I'm willing to call this stacked ADUs for $40,000 difference. It's absolutely insane that we can do that. So it's, again, we're literally building a duplex. It's, it's 2-story, it's a stacked duplex, but we're calling it ADUs to fit into that little loophole guideline. So essentially, it's really interesting. I actually didn't think that we could really do that much with this property. We own these 2 little houses here. Current tenant that lives in this house is parking back here, and this is just all fruit trees. We do have to move this fence. We have to create a 5-foot setback. We have to do a little bit of siding work. Again, I'm getting into some of the nuance, but I just want you guys to kind of see, what this all looks like in real life to meet the energy code fire rating. But yeah, so it's going to be a 25 by 40 box. Total cost to build is going to be about $350. The value when done is about $900K. So 2.5 times multiple on this one. Stacked units aren't ideal, but again, we didn't really have any other options. So that's what we're building here. Equity created on this one is about $550,000. Annual rents are going to be about $53,000 a year. So unlevered ROI, it's about 15%. So again, going to the property that we've owned for a number of years and essentially creating new revenue here. This one we benefit because it's an alley. So we do have to meet parking requirements and we're going to stack all the parking here, right? So this house will have the sort of designated parking spot over here, as will this duplex. All right, and then here's another one. This is an example of a walkback. So we've got existing duplex here in the front. There's no alley in the back. There's actually property here, property behind. This is a dead-end street. So of course, there's no way to get a drive aisle back here. We are going to put all of the parking in front. And actually in this area, it's really interesting because we're within a 1/4 mile of the bus stop. We don't have to provide any parking. So that's per code. And it's really interesting, actually, this municipality that we're building in, they actually eliminated all of the parking requirements for any unit that's under 1,200 square feet. So really cool there. Now, in real life, people in this area, they have cars, right? So while the city doesn't require that, we certainly need to factor that in for rentability and, of course, value as well. So we'll take the whole yard, turn that into parking. This will be a walk back. We also kind of ran into issues with impervious surface. So what we're trying to do is not do too much for the on-site drainage, which again is kind of a big deal in Washington State. Not sure about other municipalities, certainly not as big of a deal here in Arizona. But yeah, so we had to do these all as pavers so that these could be, pervious surface that doesn't trigger the drainage. So again, this is where a really good planner and a really good civil engineer comes in. We have another project that's like asphalt driveway that's really, really close to triggering, some on-site drainage that we would have to do. And so we're sort of trying to figure out some different ways to get around that. But essentially we're building a duplex. It's going to be kind of look like this Rambler style duplex here, 1,000 square feet per each unit. And then, this one cost to build is probably about $375. Value when done, conservatively 800,000. So basically a 2x multiple on that one. Equity created about 425,000 annual rents, very similar, 53,000. So it's a 14% unlevered ROI. So again, the challenge on this one, a little bit limited access. Of course, they're walk-back units. So it is going to, sort of hold us back on, the rents that we could accomplish. Some parking challenges, but again, it's a free lot that we're getting because we already own this property. All right, here's another one. This is one that we did. This is just like a really easy one to execute that I would say that for most of you that are on this call, again, you could very easily do something like this. So what we did is, I didn't include any photos of this, but we bought this house, which included the lot that the house is on and then this lot. And so we did a boundary line adjustment, flipped this house, I think we put like 40K into it, resold it to end user. essentially giving us the land for free. I think maybe there's a little bit of carryover balance of like maybe 20 grand max. Um, and then we built this duplex here. Now, this one is really interesting. The reason why I brought this example up is because we actually could have fit a fourplex, but we decided not to. And the reason being is a fourplex would have triggered us to do full frontage improvements, meaning curb, gutter, sidewalk, in front of this property and then also the other property that we had owned. And so we would also have to do like an ADA unit as well. And then also like have really tight parking and parking for wheelchair, whatever, disability parking. So anyways, we ran all the numbers and we were like, gosh, that's a lot of work. Let's just go ahead for a duplex. And so that's what we did here. Yeah, total build cost on this one, so 335. The value when it was done, 660, this is 2x multiple. So the equity again, 325, the annual rent, 4,800, so 14% ROI unlevered. Now, if you're doing any of the math here, we'll get to like financing stack here in a minute. I'm sure all of you guys are thinking like, well, okay, so how do you get the funds to do this? And then what do you do with all this equity? So a lot of times what we do is we try to keep our portfolio at about 50% LTV. So we will go and essentially pay ourselves back for any amount of money that we had into the project and prioritize more of the cash flow. So every investor is a little bit different on that. Essentially, the way that you could look at it would be it's like a BRRRR, but new construction. So for some investors, they might want to go to the max and, do more of like a cash out and then essentially keep it maybe at like, break even. So again, it depends on long-term goals, but there's a lot of possibility here. Essentially, when I'm running the numbers is I want to try to get to the point where my new build is, I would say, under like 70% of the ARV. If it's under 70%, that essentially means that you can do a full cash out refinance and most likely still cash flow. And so a lot of times I'll take my calculator and I'll kind of dial it in and be like, okay, well, do I want to take a little bit more money in my pocket? Do I want to, get a little bit more here? Obviously, interest rate environment and financing is it's gonna be a very fluid situation. So you're gonna have to kind of decide that when you're towards the end. But yeah, a lot of opportunity here to essentially get, these new builds for no money out of pocket, right? Or all your money back, and ideally still cash flow, right? All right, so moving on. So again, the $1,000,000 question that I get asked all the time is like, okay, so like, how do I even go about estimating what the cost to build is? So again, I just want to preface this by saying it's going to wildly vary based on finish level and region. So Midwest, I would say, it's going to be like some of your lower labor cost. So I would say that that's probably going to be some of the lower price per foot on the lower range. However, you're not going to get the ARV that you could in some of the, higher labor cost areas, right? So really tricky. I mean, I would say even in a lot of our portfolio in like the Midwest, I've run the numbers to see does it make sense to throw another duplex in the backyard or, what have you. And a lot of times I'm kind of like, well, it would be worth what it would cost us to build. And so it's not quite there yet. So I would say for the most part, anywhere that you can find in the country where the zoning is in your favor, and let's just say for duplexes, it's going to be at that like $500,000 or more, you're probably going to be all in to build maybe like 275, 300 max, then that could make sense, right? So anyways, cost per foot, again, it's going to wildly vary, but just to give you guys some kind of a range, garage conversion anywhere from like 80 to 150K, depending on if you have to meet energy code, you've got to do egress, you've got to do electrical, plumbing, all the things, right? Target revenue, again, is going to be based on the area. Ground up Dadu, we are actually, I put this a little bit high because we are able to get a lot of our costs down. We've got a lot of subs that we've worked with over the years, and so we sort of get preferential pricing, if you will. Our cost to build is going to be closer to that like 250 a foot. But again, I'd rather quote you guys a little bit higher. This high end, I mean, that's going to be, I would say like, really modern finishes, maybe higher end finishes in like more of an urban core major city, right? So some cost here. And then like a traditional build for a duplex, you do get a little bit of economies of scale. Mostly I would say on the roofing side, obviously you're going to get some preferential pricing when you're doing insulation on 2 units and painting on 2 units, things like that. So it's going to be a little bit lower. But yeah, I mean, you're really just going to have to talk to builders in the area and just try to get an idea of what the local costs are. All right, so some financing options. Obviously, if you're like an owner occupant, you can get renovation loans. So I added this in because I don't want people to sleep on the fact that, again, if you're a owner occupant, you can get Fannie Mae Homestyle or FHA 203K, wrap those build costs into mortgage based on future value. So really cool here. We did a call, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half ago on this loan specifically. But if you're not an owner occupant, really there's kind of these other two options, right? So HELOC, which is our strategy right now, we're actually getting HELOCs on our entire portfolio, leaving the existing first mortgage alone. They'll say because we've got like 4% interest rates. We went and refinanced pretty much our entire portfolio in 2021, 2022. So we don't want to touch those currently. So we're getting HELOCs to do the construction. What's great about the HELOCs is you don't have to worry about a draw process. So you don't have to, do appraisals and, like things like that and go through the construction draw and call the bank every time you want to get some money back and, wait for them to send an inspector out and then, prepaid the invoices, wait to get reimbursed. It's a bit of a process, right? So HELOCs are a really great way to do this. And then we'll go back and do permanent financing with like a DSCR loan. So HELOC is a really, really good option. And then DSCR loans, obviously these are debt service coverage ratio loans. These are going to be more asset based. The cool thing here is that the loans are going to be based on the rental income of the new unit and the ARV. So there's quite a few lenders. If anyone needs lender recommendations, I'm happy to share any contacts with you. But a lot of times, they'll maybe finance like 100% of the purchase price and then like 80 to 85% of the build. It's going to sort of be based on experience. To the point where it's maybe at like 75 loan to ARV, right? So there's a few calculations that you have to put in there. But anyway, these rates are going to be closer to like hard money loans, though. I mean, I think on the lower end, maybe like 8.5 all the way up to 12%. Again, it's going to be very much like experience based. All right, so those some financing options here. Again, just to kind of show you guys, what I'm seeing in terms of the markets that we're focusing this strategy on is, again, obviously there's a lot of geographic constraints in the Pacific Northwest, which is the area that we were building in. Not so friendly on landlord tenant law, but again, we get the huge bump in appreciation, right? You could pretty much bank on the appreciation every year. Now we're able to get a lot of cash flow because they make sure that we can dial in our construction costs. We're also going to put a product on the market that is going to be like the highest maximized units, right? So that's really, really important. The other thing too is you want to look at the shortage metric. So again, you want to have like household formations being greater than new permits issued. So for anyone, it's interesting. It's like, leading markets. Yes, Phoenix is one of those. However, we have so much A-class new construction that it has actually brought down the rents for everybody else. So interestingly, B-class is actually really suffering, mostly because the tenant is going to say, well, wait a second, I can pay, $50 to $100 more a month and get brand new construction with all the amenities. They're going to go for that, right? When you have so much new construction, especially A-class that's come onto the market, their number one goal as soon as they get CO is to lease it up, which means they're going to offer concessions. They're going to do anything that they can to get those tenants to move in to fill the building so that they can complete their refi exit strategy. And it really does hurt the rest of the market. So that's something that's really important to note. This is happening also like in Dallas. Again, a lot of areas where there's a lot of new permits and new construction and apartment complexes. You just really got to watch out for that because you don't want to be trying to compete with those guys. And then again, the zoning arbitrage. So obviously like anything with an alley, we love it. It's great. It's going to solve a lot of access issues. It's going to sometimes solve parking. It's just going to be a lot easier. It also kind of creates a little bit of separation of space, especially if you have that front house, it's going to be parking probably in front of the house. And then you've got, the back, which is going to be the other unit, and then the separation in between the two. So if you see something with an alley and that the house is tucked up front, it's probably, something that you should really dive into. Okay, so sort of shifting gears, again, we've been talking a lot about, the nuances of the areas that I'm building in, but I just want to flag this for everybody that's like, okay, well, I'm not Washington. I'm not going to be building in Washington. Like, how does this apply to me? So one, I guarantee that there's a lot of other jurisdictions that have this zoning change, if you will, that I haven't added here. So this is all that I could find online. This is, I have like RSS feeds of what's going on. I just got one actually this morning for Maricopa County where I live that they've changed the zoning. So this is all really, really good. The reason why I wanted to do this call this time of year is one, again, in some areas like the market's down. And so for those of you that are savvy, that are on the call saying like, I want to do this strategy for 2026, right now would be the time to be making these offers, right? This, especially any seller that's been on the market for a little bit, like go ahead, throw out a lower offer, get it tied up under contingency, make sure that it's going to work. This is a really good time to do this. That way you get permits by like early spring. You're building over the summer. You can have a product to put on hopefully in early fall and you're good to go, right? So here are a couple of areas that I wanted to flag both at the state level and then also at the like local jurisdiction level, right? So I will mention though that a lot of these are not necessarily landlord friendly states. Unfortunately, we don't get the benefit of being like landlord friendly and zoning friendly in most areas, as Dallas maybe is an outlier of that. Charlotte is also a little bit of an outlier of that, but a lot of these other ones, again, just want to flag that. California as a state, obviously, they now allow 2 primary units, ADUs on all single family lots, no owner occupancy requirements. That's the really big detail that historically has been an issue for most people, right? As an investor, I'm not going to owner occupy something that I'm going to be building on. And so even a lot of the projects that I was showing you guys as case study examples, we haven't pursued them in the past because they had this owner occupancy requirement, or we would have to do the short plat, which in the beginning of the call I mentioned would take like 15 to 18 months. And we would have to go through all these hoops and it would just, take a lot of time and effort. And I'm actually really glad that we waited because now everything is opened up and sort of the jurisdictions are like, we're open for business, please build in our area, right? So anyways, all of this is trending across the country. And so I really want you all to pay attention to this and flag it, right? So anyway, Dallas, Texas, this is actually, I would say, one of the most aggressive upzoning that I've seen. They revised the code to permit up to 8-unit residential buildings under the 1 and 2 family code. I did a post about this in the Inner Circle maybe, 6 months ago. But Dallas, Texas would be a really interesting one to pay attention to. Now, though, the issue with Dallas is a lot of A-class new construction. So if you can go to some of maybe like the trending neighborhoods that this zoning exists in and do infill and maybe even Airbnb, that could be the play there, right? So anyways, I'm just saying this to say, really pay attention to the pros and cons of investing in these different areas. All right. So another thing that I just wanted to get for anyone that's not familiar with the build to rent or the build to sell process, this is sort of how it goes. I actually launched a software tool again for Inner Circle inside the member area. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, it's under resources and it's build to rent project navigator. You can actually put your project in there and then it's going to ask you all of the questions. So you'll have to go to the code and, essentially fill it all out. And then you can do a PDF so that you can save that. But a lot of investors that I've coached in the past, they've said like, okay, I don't even know where to start. Like, what does this look like? What's the time frame? So anyways, I want to focus maybe more of our time together on Q&A, but I'll give you guys the slides for this. If you want to, for those that aren't familiar with the build to rent, this is sort of how it goes there. And then I want to end with some tech tools for those of you maybe that are already building or thinking about like, I'm in on this strategy, I want to do it, but are there some ways to make it a little bit more efficient? So I want to end on this. Number one, I am absolutely obsessed with Notebook LM. Anyone that has a paid Google account, you get it for free. So a big element of building is you're actually going to live in the code, meaning the local jurisdiction zoning. So what I ended up doing is actually create a new notebook. And then I have, the way that this technology works is it's going to pull all of the resources. This could be YouTube content. It could be text documents. It could be PDF. You name it. any kind of source document here. And then you can essentially chat with it and it's going to answer your questions based on the knowledge base that you've already fed it. So it took me maybe 15 minutes to set up each of these separate notebooks. I would recommend that you actually set it up per municipality that you're going to be looking into. And then that way you can chat here. I know it's probably a little bit hard to read, but I think I said, is there a max height for Old Town Business District? This is one of my projects that we're building in. I didn't want to look through the code. I wanted to see if Notebook LM could answer this for me, and it did. So tip is going to, again, take you maybe 15 minutes to set this up. It's going to save you a mass amount of time. All right, number two, you're going to need site plans. So we are pretty much analyzing deals every single day. I will start with sort of like a Google Earth view, and then I'll kind of see like, okay, do we have valley access? Like what are setbacks? And then I will send it over to my team to get a site plan. So this is one that actually just came up yesterday. As you can see, the water line for the property next door goes through this lot, which really sucks. So we'll have to sort of sort out how to handle that one. But anyways, we use Rayon for that. Rayon is fantastic. It'll like quickly overlay. Maybe if you have plans that you use on a regular basis, you could just drop it in. It can also work with like CAD files, a lot of different files. You have like multiplayer mode, sort of like Figma, so you can have other team members sort of interacting with it, but it's really quick for drawing up site plans. So the reason why this is important is anytime you're talking to maybe a meeting with the city or the county and you're saying like, look, this is what I'm proposing to do, like, is this okay? If you can come with a site plan, you're going to get much better answers because they're going to be seeing what you're looking at and they're going to say, well, okay, you know, we need more of a setback. Actually, this is what came up yesterday. You need more of a setback here because there's an existing sewer line. And so that's going to be 10 feet. So we quickly like adjusted that and said, okay, does this plan still fit? So Rayon is fantastic. I want to say that it's like $10 or $15 a month. So really inexpensive, but it's going to save a massive amount of time. And you're not going to have to wait for like your planner or your surveyor to draw something up. I mean, obviously we have like a full team that supports us in terms of the planning and the surveying, but sometimes they get really busy and I'm like, I need an answer right now. I've got a meeting with the city or I want to, see if I can fit my cool plan that we build, over and over again. So we just do it in-house now with Rayon. It's really fantastic. All right. And then here's another one. Let's see if my video plays. This is a really cool one that one of my team member, Stefan, who's our director of operations, came up with. And what this problem solves is you're going to need a lot of estimates from a lot of different people. We're talking planners, surveyors, civil engineers, structural engineers, drafters, architects, you name it, insulation, foundation, all the things, right? And so what he ended up doing is he uses one of the LLMs, he uses Perplexity to find all of the various vendors in the areas that we're building in. And then again, it's a little bit hard to see, but he sets them all up into Airtable. And then he creates an email and it's going to include our site plan or our building plans or, whatever it is that we're trying to get quotes on. And it will mass email all of these people. So it's really, really incredible. So I had him do this for structural engineers and we got some really good quotes. I mean, they quoted us back right away. And then everything is organized in Airtable. We pretty much come up with like maybe our top 5 vendors. We can look at their historical bids so that, on future projects, we're just going back to our top 5. But it's absolutely incredible, so powerful. I think we pay maybe $120 a year for Airtable. I just connect it to our company Gmail. So it literally comes from our Gmail and sends it all to them. And like I said, we can attach plans, we can attach videos. It's really, really cool, really, really fast. So anyways, this has been a massive time saver. On a project that we were doing a while ago, I had a quote. We needed like mini splits and I had to call these HVAC contractors and it took me like 2 hours and all these back and forth. They all wanted plans. They all wanted me to email. And then Stefan said, I've got a better way, came up with this. So again, massive, massive time saver. All right. And then last thing I want to note, there's a really big difference between designers or drafters and licensed architects. And so when you are developing building plans, for the most part, if it's going to be under 4 units, you can actually make do with just a really good drafter or designer versus an architect. So I've got some estimates here. The plans that we have for a lot of our duplex, we actually paid a designer $450 for the building plans, right? We still have to have a structural engineer do all the engineering calcs, but literally $450. Whereas licensed architects were quoting me $9,000 for the same plan, right? So anyways, a lot of times for whatever reason, people think they have to go to the licensed architect. And of course, if that's the rule or the requirement for the municipality that you're working with, then so be it. You have to have that stamp anyway. But if it's not required, go with a drafter or designer. It's going to save you thousands of dollars. So again, they can produce CAD files. The last one that we had, I mean, he got it back in 4 days. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll go online and I'll find floor plans that I like, and I'll say, hey, Rob, this is what I like. This is what, direction kind of I'm thinking. And then he'll be like, great. 24 hours later, I get a full draft back, right? So again, a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot less expensive. Okay, I know that was a little bit rapid fire. So I'm going to go check out the chat here and also just open it up for if anyone has questions. I'm going to sort of start from the top here. And if anyone has like maybe a longer question, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and we can engage that way. All right, first question is, will the slide deck be available afterwards? Yes, absolutely. We'll get that out to you guys with the replay tomorrow. Mary says, what do you think of prefab homes or container homes? And then how do banks assess values for these? So Mary, this is a really good question. I've actually looked at sort of doing some prefab, but unfortunately we've not found that the cost is really that much less, at least in the areas that we're building in, to make it make sense to go that route. And then, you flagged another really good question is like, how do the banks assess value for those? The container homes, I would say, would be actually more tricky. Even actually really tricky when it comes to meeting energy code and then sort of doing all of that. I would consider that probably like a conversion. So it might end up being more expensive at the end of the day. I know that they're really cool and they look awesome. That's not necessarily my lane. We've always just done stick built. So maybe there's efficiencies that I'm not thinking of there, but for the most part, at least in our experience related to prefab, there's just not really the cost benefit there. All right, Alberto, what part of Washington is this in? We primarily build in Snohomish County. I stay out of the city of Seattle. How much was the structural engineer? Todd, that's a really great question. So I want to share this with you guys on the note of the wide range of estimates that you're going to get when you build. So we reached out to, I'm trying to even think of, maybe call it like 17 structural engineers. And I was getting quotes. This is actually on a new build, not the conversion. The conversion was a little bit different. I was getting quotes as high as $8,000 all the way down to $2,300. And structural engineering, again, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, especially if you're doing little projects like this. Like we're talking a few pages, right? So not really that much work, I guess, if you can put it that. I mean, work obviously, but I think it took him maybe 3 days of work. So we ended up going with maybe not the lowest expensive one. The other thing I should mention on that note is I always ask, what is it going to cost? And then how long will it take you to get this back? Because we had some structural engineers that came highly recommended by friends, but they couldn't get to our project for like 3 or 4 weeks. And so I looked at that and I said, well, shoot, I've got a guy that can do it in 3 days. The difference in price is like $300. So I'm going to go with the guy that can get it in 3 days. So you always have to kind of look at that as well. My husband always says you're not always going to get fast, cheap, and good. You're maybe get 2 of them. But yeah, definitely, have those conversations. Make sure that you understand that time frame, because what I found with some of these engineers and planners and surveyors is it's kind of like once you sign the contract, they kind of have you've committed to them. And then if they end up holding your project hostage, which is actually what happened in our conversion, the structural engineer took like 5 months. That was really, really frustrating, right? So the other thing too that I want to know is I always dangle a carrot that we have multiple projects going on. And I say like, look, hey, if you do a really good job on this one, I've got three others, same city for you, ready to go. But let's get this one rocking and rolling. So that goes really, really far. All right. Ashley asks, can you talk about the properties you are building on that you already own with a loan and how building the new unit impacts the existing loan lender? It's a really good question. So I'll be honest, I kind of looked at this and said, gosh, what's the best way to do this? I like to have the math tell me what to do. So, I'm looking at this like, gosh, with a lot of our properties, as mentioned, we keep everything at like a 50 LTV, which is incredibly conservative. I get sort of made fun of all the time from our investor friends that are like, why, you should really like max to the hill. But I'll be honest, when we go for a loan and we show our SREO with all of the equity that I have, the banks are like, done, stamped, like you're good, you want more. Like they like us. We look really, really good on paper. And so I say that to say I've had other investors do the opposite, where they like max LTV, their debt coverage ratio is really low. And then they come back to me, they're like, how are you getting financing? All these lenders are just like really beating me up over it. And it's because we've strategically said, like, look, we're going to sort of prioritize cash flow because we know that we're, still going to be getting loans and like doing all of this, right? And the banks really like that. So I know that that's not the popular answer, which is like put all the money in your pocket, and it looks really good that way, and you have all this money to spend. But in reality, the banks, they just don't like it. So, anyways, to answer your question, we are leaving the first mortgages alone for now. We are building essentially with cash, with HELOCs, or with existing cash that we have in the bank. We might, because we're getting actually quite a few projects like in the pipeline, we might also work with some private lenders for the funding, build that way. And then I think by the time that these new units come on the market next year, fingers crossed, the interest rates are going to be better. So then we'll go ahead and complete the condo, take off, essentially pay off the underlying first mortgage, uh, essentially condo, and sort of put them into two different loans, front house, back house, or duplex or whatever, and do it that way. The other way that oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that was great. That was great explanation. And I'm curious because I also have a property that I can do something in the backyard with, and I have about 50% LTV. I guess my
Perfect.
my question was also in terms of the property having an existing loan, the bank, theoretically having a first lien on that property, and you go to build on it, are you letting the bank know that you're building something in the back, or you're just going ahead and doing it and then refinancing later and paying off? Well, yeah, I
Yep.
guess. How does that
Yeah.
help?
I mean, if anything, it's to their benefit. They're getting more units on the same collateral, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked that. Yeah, you don't need a permission slip. You don't need to go back to the lender unless you're trying to do like a partial lien release, or sorry, not a lien release, a partial reconveyance, where you're saying like, and I've done that in the past. It's really hard to get approved, but basically you go to the bank and you say, hey, this was your collateral. Now I want to conduit or sell it or carve off this back. Will you reconvey the property essentially and let me unlock this other whatever parcel or however you created that? And then just keep the loan on the existing collateral, which is single family plus land or whatever. It's possible, but it's like good luck. If it's a local bank and it's a portfolio loan or DSCR, sure, might be probable. If it's like a conventional first mortgage and you're trying to track down the servicer, like good luck. I mean, you're probably not going to be able to execute on that. So no permission required. Um, like I said, though, if you're trying to do like a full construction loan, um, any DSCR lender, any local bank is going to require that they be in first position. And then they're going to want a construction loan. Then they're going to allow you to build in the back or front or, whatever, again, what you're doing with the property. And then you're going to have to go and refinance. So my opinion, I was like, well, I can just save myself the hassle, go get HELOC and then build and then do either refinance on one loan, DSCR, if I'm just going to hold both and then not do the condo, or I can separate them out. So I'm going to cross that bridge when I get there. It's not always advantageous to complete the condo if you're going to keep something long term, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Okay, so just to follow up to that, in all of your properties, do you have a project where you have a loan on it, you're using HELOC to build an additional unit, and once you're done building, you're going to refinance, then are you refinancing on both units? So,
You have a choice.
okay.
Yeah, you have a choice. You could either go get like a portfolio or DSCR loan on the whole thing and not do the condo, or you could say, well, maybe I want to have separate loans for whatever reason, right? And then do the condo, and then have loan on front, loan on back. Yeah, you've essentially got options there.
Okay.
Awesome. And then, yeah, the HELOCs, primarily local banks. And again, these are all second position. So keep in mind for the most part, when you do second position HELOCs on investment properties, right? So it's like, can't really get much more of an ask. They're mostly going to say 60 LTV is the max, less your first mortgage. So I just want to be honest, you have to have a lot of equity. Now, a lot of times what I do is I say, well, you want this property, you want that property, and we will cross collateral. So we'll go for maybe $500,000 of a HELOC, and we'll say, you take this property, you take this property, you take this property. And a lot of times the banks, if you have that relationship, they're going to be fine with it,
Mhm.
right? Now, it's really tricky though if you're trying to sell anything, because then again, it's like you sold it, but then the bank's going to want all that money. So I would say you're really going to have to look big picture and say like, okay, what am I trying to do here? Because again, if you're trying to sell anything soon with a like second HELOC on it while you're trying to build, it's gets really complicated and the bank's not going to like that.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, great question. All right, Kumar says, any recommendations for ADU architects or construction firms in Washington? So I use Lakeside ADU. Kumar, I'm not sure if they will go to Seattle, to be honest. There's a number of firms, though, I see them all the time that are listed in Seattle. I just stay out of Seattle. So yeah, but Lakeside ADU is absolutely incredible. I know the owner there. I work with the son. We've worked with them for a number of years, and they're sort of our one-stop shop, meaning they do our surveys, they do our condo maps, they do our civil engineering, and then sometimes I can kind of convince them to do our design. So they are absolutely incredible. They don't do structural, but again, structural is pretty easy. And again, if people need that. All right, so Ryan asked, does the drafter understand municipality rules and create site plans as well? Yes. So, one, I would confirm that though ahead of time, and especially depending on whatever requirements are in the area that you're in. So, again, I'm going to speak to Washington State. We've got this energy code, which is absolutely insane. So, uh, just to not complicate it for the people that are not in Washington, it's basically we have to meet these credits, which means we have to do mini splits, which aren't actually the best in Washington State, and basically show them how we're going to get the credits, showing that we're more energy efficient, and it's just really obnoxious, and it's actually going to get worse when they implement the new code. We're currently operating off of 2021 code for that. So, anyways, when Ryan's asking like, does the drafter understand these rules? One, confirm that they do, and then two, make sure that you just ask them like, hey, are you going to do my energy calcs as well? But again, just know that the drafters typically are not going to do your structural. So that's really important. They can create site plans. I find for whatever reason, our civil engineer typically does a site plan or our surveyor. So you're going to be assembling a team, if you will. And so sometimes it's a little hot potato, like, hey, who wants to do the site plan? Who's gonna, and so sometimes the civil is like, I'll do it. And then the surveyor's like, well, I'll do it. And, you know, I'm just like, okay, sort of jokingly, like, whatever. You want me to draw straws? Like, have at it. Yes, Todd, I see you unmuted. Did you
Yeah, I
have a
just had
question?
a quick question.
Sure.
I have a single family lot in Seattle. It's like 7,600 square feet, and I'm working your exact strategy to a T because I have a
Awesome.
duplex in
Love
the
it.
front that we converted the basement, renting that out. I have an ADU that the main level is rented out as a long term, and then the loft upstairs is an Airbnb. We're getting close
Love it.
to
That's so cool.
7,500 or $8,000 a month for this, parcel that we just maximized the heck out of. Well, the woman
Brilliant.
to the north of me is getting older in age, and I've developed a relationship with her. And maybe when she decides to leave that property, I want to purchase it as well. and then potentially I have like an assemblage opportunity where now I have two parcels together and I'm doubling my footprint. Who would I look
Yep.
to work with to in that type of scenario to consult with or help me if I was going to build, maximize that space?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say a really good planner would be helpful, or you can start with an architect. Sometimes architects do the planning side. You sort of just have to ask them. It's really, really interesting. So I would probably start there. Maybe somebody that's already working in the jurisdiction that you're in.
Hmm.
Um, and just, yeah, just, throw that scenario by them. Or you can reach out to multiple people and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Is this in your wheelhouse?
It
Like,
seems like you have that
yeah.
approach, like 17, you did 17 bids or whatever you sent out to 17 different vendors. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah.
Well, but keep in mind, I mean, so I don't want to make it sound like that was a lot of work. Like literally that took 5 minutes with Airtable. That's why I wanted
Hmm.
to like, so I'm a systems and processes efficiency person. Todd, I know you are like also in that lane. So as you guys are going through this, again, I don't want to downplay the fact that you're going to have to talk to a lot of people, but I also want to mention that there's a lot of different ways that you can implement technology to help you along the way. So yeah, so with our, reaching out to 17 people again, that was like literally me typing up an email that sounded kind of like it was customized to that person. It wasn't, it was a mass email. With anytime you can have any kind of visual, like do it, right? So have any kind of like site plan or have any kind of like photo of the property or like anything like that. And then definitely reach out to multiple people and then be like, is this in your wheelhouse?
Hmm. Okay.
Does
One
that
other just
help?
quick question. Are we
Yeah, go for
always
it.
as investors, are we always tapping into these HELOCs and borrowing versus using like our own cash and savings a little bit because we could potentially make more money investing that cash than we would be charged on an interest rate? Or why not always just what's the overall strategy with some of that stuff? Why are we always borrowing?
Yeah. So I would say most people don't have endless amount of money sitting in the bank to do that,
No,
right?
I'm not
So
one, but
the,
yeah, yeah, I hear
right?
you. Mhm.
Yeah, so it's interesting though, because you bring up a really good point. So for me, my like money philosophy is I want every single dollar to go to work for me every single day. I don't want money just sitting around. So like obviously on the flip side though, you have to have liquidity in the bank when you go to these banks. It's sort of weird because you're asking them for a loan, but they want to see that you have money in the bank. And it's kind of
Right.
like, well, if I had all this money, I wouldn't need the loan, right? And so I like to run like a return on analysis of my money, have it invested in certain places. A lot of times, if we're doing like a bunch of private loans, for example, I'll go to the bank and that's listed as an asset, of course, right? With a liquidity event. So a lot of times the
Hmm.
bank will be like, oh, okay, you've got 400 grand out in private loans. Like I see that. Okay. And it's got income attached to that. That's fine. They will include that in my sort of liquidity calculation. But 1,000%, if you've got a bunch of money sitting in the bank, like go use it. Because right now you're going to pay on the debt, probably more than you could get in return, depending on what types of investments you're doing. So I would do that calculation, if you will, and see like, does it make
Hmm.
more sense to pour money into this project or invest it elsewhere, right?
I
And
think
then
I
and then borrow.
kind of answered my own question in my head, but I was thinking it at one point. So I
Yeah.
just put it out there. But also, is it the risk standpoint that if for some reason you default or you're taking it out in a business name, now you're protected in a sense, or some terrible calamity happens, it's the bank's money or
Yeah.
whatever. It's not yours.
Yeah. I would say that there are a lot of people that sort of use that as a fail-safe. In
Hmm.
my opinion, if that's even on the table, then you're probably not doing the deals correctly or you're not a good operator,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I would say it's really prominent in the multifamily space. They're like, yeah, this is non-recourse loan. If anything happens, it's the bank's problem. And I'm like, well, but what about all the equity that you had to get into it, right? So yeah, I don't subscribe to that mentality as much, Todd, personally. I like to do projects that literally I try to figure out why I shouldn't do the deal. And then I'm like, dang, well, it just makes so much money that way. Well, shoot, it makes so much money this way. It makes so much money that way. I mean, we've never been, I would say, like high volume operators. It's like, hey, we
Hmm.
want to get into really, really solid deals that make sense, that are going to cash flow really well, that are going to pay us a lot of money when we're done with it, that we can continue to roll into future projects. And basically, at that point, you're playing with house money,
Mhm.
right?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, really good question. All right. Okay, let me see. Um, Ashley, can you go over the Flip Plus Duplex project again? I missed that portion of that one. Was it a property you already own? Yeah, we'll send out the replay tomorrow, so you can grab that section there. But essentially, it was purchasing a single family home that had a really large lot. And we flipped the house, spun that off to an owner occupant, got that multifamily land for free, built on that, refinance. I think we ended up paying ourselves like 150, so all of our money back plus $150,000. And then that one was cash flowing about $1,000 a month. We ended up selling that one in the early 2000s to get into, we actually did a 1031 exchange into like a 14 unit out of state. But yeah, I mean, that was a stupid money deal. I mean, it no money down essentially, right? Paid us $150,000 for doing it, plus cash flow, plus we made a bunch of money on the sale. Like those kind of deals are out there. It was literally on the MLS for like 45 days. Nobody else bought it. But again, it's because we have this tool set of like looking and analyzing these deals different than any other investor. I would say, I don't know, maybe 2% of investors ever get into what we're talking about here. Most people are like, a building that's sort of like outside my wheelhouse. That's really risky. I don't know anything about it. And so they just sort of stay clear, right? So hopefully you guys learned more today, and maybe it's a little bit less scary. I'm sure that you all still have a lot of questions like, okay, how can this work? But my advice to you would be first look at your existing portfolio and maybe even go back to the images that I shared and say, like, do I have opportunity to optimize what I currently own? Because that is going to be the lowest risk scenario that you can get into, because essentially you already own it, right? So you already have the land, you already have the garage or the shed or whatever. You already have the yard space. So you're going to benefit from not having to buy the land and make sure that it all works, right? You can go straight into talking to a planner, probably starting with a survey, and then going into the city. All right, I know we're over with time, but does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up? I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope that you guys got a lot of value out of today.
What was that? What was that tool you meant? You said there was another calculator or tool in this build to
Ah,
own, build to rent strategy. What was that called again?
yeah, it's the Build to Rent Project Navigator. So essentially, you can click into it's first. It's going to ask you like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do ground up construction? Are you trying to do like a conversion? And then once you click on like what you're trying to do, it's going to open up a whole list of questions like, okay, the setbacks. Have you considered for fire? Have you considered for traffic? Have you considered for parking? And like all the things. And then basically, it's just going to flag some things that you should probably think about with your project. But it's the Build to Rent Project Navigator, and it's under the resources tab.
Resources. Okay. Thank you.
If you can't find it, though, send me a message and I'll help you.
So one more question, since Ashley had asked it, similar to what she asked, except if we want to demo the existing structure that we have a loan against and then replace that, do we need to notify the bank at that case?
Well, that's a really good question, Ryan. I think technically in your loan docs, you probably would have that come up, but how would they know?
Exactly. And I prefer to pay, I mean, especially if, we got a 3%, rate on
Yeah.
it, right? And like, if we have to pay that off at a higher interest rate loan, like construction loan or HELOC or whatever it is, like, yeah, I would prefer not to.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, again, that's such an edge case. I imagine again it's gonna be in the loan docs, but worst case scenario, they find out somehow and they call the note, and you'd obviously have to be okay with paying that off or coming in with another loan to do that. But
That's a
if
good
I were
point.
you,
Yeah.
I'd probably just move forward. Yeah.
Nice.
Hi, Jen.
I
I
had a
just have a
question.
question about, oh, sorry. Didn't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead.
interrupt.
Oh, go ahead. We'll go Mary
Yeah.
and then Kumar.
About local banks. Do most local banks that offer HELOCs from investment properties require relationship? Because I did reach out to that bank that you have referred to me, but they want my accounts to be moved to their bank, and that relationship could take a while, right? Maybe a year or two. So, I'm just curious, do most banks require that relationship building, or is there a bank that could just like, here you go, you know?
If you find one, Mary, let me know. I've never found a bank that was willing to do second position HELOC.
Okay.
Also at, again, we're talking about a couple $100,000. I'm not asking for like 50 grand, right?
Right,
I don't
right.
fall into like the credit union box. They
Okay.
literally don't know what to do with us or our tax returns. So
Hmm.
if you're like an owner occupant going for a HELOC on your primary, like absolutely go to a credit union. They're going to give you the best terms. But if we're talking about investment property, not an owner occupied,
Yeah.
and second position and a HELOC, then yeah, from my experience, unless anyone else has seen different, it's going to be a local bank and they're going to want that relationship.
It's a
Meaning
relationship.
like you've got to
Okay.
have some accounts with them, right? I mean, even on the commercial side, when we do like small multifamily deals, every single commercial banker is like, yeah, we want all your accounts. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you
Mm,
two. But a lot of times, they want us to deposit, they're like, deposit 100 grand and we'll give you quarter point off the
mm.
rate. I'm like, okay, here's 100 grand, whatever. So
Got it.
it's all
Okay.
a negotiation when we're talking about these things that really don't fit into a box. So I
Okay.
wish I had a better solution. I wish I could say, oh, call this bank, they'll do it for
Yeah, yeah.
anyone. And
Okay.
unfortunately,
No,
it's not
no
the case.
worries. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. All right, Kumar, you're up.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for doing this call. Super helpful.
Of course.
My question was related to the bank question earlier. Are there banks that you recommend that are used to doing these? It looked like you were doing some portfolio or bundling of the HELOCs, like with multiple properties
Mhm.
as collateral. I'm not sure if this is like quite common. So I imagine it's very like few specialized, some, local banks that are used to doing that. And so wondering how you navigate
Yeah.
that and if you have any referrals.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of very, very similar to Mary's question, right? I'll be honest, even my banker who's doing these HELOCs for us, he's like, Jennifer, this is sort of like something that we don't really do, but because of our relationship, we're doing it for you, right? And I'm like, okay, like thanks. But I asked him, I was like, well, so if anyone else wants to do it, is it okay if I share your name? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. But he did say for sure, this is Darren at Coastal Community Bank was like, we need to establish a relationship. Essentially, what these private bankers are going to do, they're going to go in front of their committee and say, hey, are we willing to do a second position HELOC on an investment property for this person? And the committee is going to be like, well, what's our relationship look like with this person? And if they don't have one, they're going to be like, no, we'd rather support our existing customers, right? So, my advice to anyone that's like, okay, well, I fall into this category, how do I navigate this? Is you're probably going to have a lot of conversations. My advice is going to be to avoid the Chase, the Wells Fargo, any of the like big banks and go, meaning national banks, and go with local smaller banks, probably with a construction loan focus. Um, so anyone that's doing construction loans locally are probably going to be more apt to do like a HELOC strategy and just explain and say like, look, I'm sort of getting into this. I want to do a couple. Probably I'll be falling under the construction loan category, but I happen to have, a portfolio of properties in your area that have a lot of equity. The problem is I've got really good rates that I don't want to lose. And so can you sort of deal with me on this? But I'm going to be, a long-term client and there's going to be a lot of other loan potential. Then I think that that'll open up some more doors, but you're probably going to have quite a few conversations. Again, Kumar, like I can get you in the door with Darren, but similar to what Mary was saying, like they're going to say, okay, great, Kumar, this all sounds good. We can definitely help you out, but we're going to want to see some money in our bank.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I also do want to reiterate for everybody that, so in my opinion, the HELOC is the best way because right now, I mean, I think with the HELOC rates are like at 6%. I don't want to discount the fact that there are other lenders that will do this and they do it all day long. It's just their rates are going to be 1.5 points with a little bit of a prepay at probably a 8.5 at best, if not more of like a 10, 11% interest. So for those of you that are like, gosh, I can't find a bank that's willing to do a HELOC, or I don't have options for HELOC, whatever, then there's for sure a line of DSCR lenders that'll do this for you. The other thing that I want to point out is don't discount private lenders, right? So a private lender could potentially do collateral on the property that you're building on. Other properties, I mean, there's sort of like no rules for that. And it's for sure going to be a better rate than if you go to a DSCR lender. So again, I don't want to make sure that I don't want to steer everybody to say you have to go get a HELOC for this is the only way to do it. It's certainly not. There's a lot of other ways that you can structure the debt stack, if you will. But those are, again, like HELOC, or your own cash is always going to be the best deal, of course. Next would be probably HELOC, the DSCR lenders. So there's a lot of options there. Awesome. Any other final questions before we wrap up? Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining me on this call today. You guys are going to hear a lot more from me. And actually, I'm going to do a post in the forum today about our themed Airbnb. So we're super excited about this one. So I'll share that with you guys of like what that looks like. And if this one crushes it, then we're probably going to do a lot more of our daddies as Airbnbs. So that should be super fun. But anyways, I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Happy holidays, and we will see you all again soon. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.